In the dusty plains of 1880s Texas, where the sun beat down like a relentless hammer on an anvil and the wind whispered secrets through the mesquite trees, lived a cowboy named Harlan Hawk Thompson, a man whose life had been carved from the rawhide of hardship and loss. His face etched with lines that told stories of stampedes survived, gunfights narrowly escaped, and a heart that had been shattered more times than he cared to count, starting with the day his parents were taken by cholera when he was just a boy of 12. Leaving him to fend for himself in a world that chewed up the weak and spat them out like tobacco juice. And though he grew into a tall, broad-shouldered figure with piercing blue eyes that could stare down a coyote, inside he carried a void as vast as the prairie sky, a loneliness that no amount of cattle drives or saloon brawls could fill, until one fateful day when he rode into the bustling town of Abilene, his spurs jingling like distant church bells, and stumbled upon an advertisement in the local gazette for mail-order brides from the eastern cities, women seeking husbands in the untamed West, and Harlan, weary of his solitary nights under the stars with only his horse Rusty for company, decided to take a chance, wiring his details to the matrimonial agency in Chicago, describing himself as a ranch owner with a modest spread, honest work ethic, and a yearning for companionship, little knowing that his simple request would unravel a tale of profound emotion and redemption. Weeks later, as the autumn leaves began to turn the color of rust on the few trees that dotted his land, a telegram arrived at the post office, summoning him back to town, and there, in the dimly lit office of the agency representative, a slick-talking man named Mr. Elias Finch, with a mustache waxed to perfection and a suit that screamed city sophistication, presented Harlan with a portfolio of 10 potential brides, each one more alluring than the last, their photographs capturing smiles that promised beauty, grace, and the kind of domestic bliss that made a man's heart ache with possibility. There was Isabella, the raven-haired beauty from Boston with eyes like emeralds and a talent for piano. Victoria, a blonde schoolteacher from New York whose letters spoke of poetry and refined manners. Eliza, a spirited redhead from Philadelphia who boasted skills in cooking and sewing. And so on, down the line to the 10th, each woman vetted and eager for a life on the frontier. But as Harlan flipped through the pages, his calloused fingers lingering on the glossy images, something stirred within him, a deep-seated empathy born from his own rejections in life, the times he'd been passed over for jobs, for friendships, for love, because he was too rough around the edges, too scarred by the wild, and in that moment, with the weight of his past pressing on his chest like a boulder, he looked up at Mr. Finch and uttered the words that would change everything, "Give me the one no one wanted." The agent's eyebrows shot up like startled prairie dogs, his composure cracking for the first time, as he stammered that surely Harlan jested, that these 10 were the cream of the crop, handpicked for him based on his profile. But Harlan shook his head firmly, his voice steady as a loaded revolver, insisting that in every batch there must be one overlooked, one deemed unsuitable by the picky suitors before him, perhaps too plain, too broken, too burdened by life's cruelties, and he wanted her, because he knew what it felt like to be the last choice, the forgotten soul in a sea of shinier options, and after a long pause, Mr. Finch sighed, reaching into a drawer for a crumpled envelope marked, "Rejected," pulling out a faded photograph of a woman named Clara Beaumont. Her face partially obscured by a shadow, her eyes downcast, her dress simple and worn, with a note attached explaining her history. A widow at 25, scarred from a childhood fire that marred her left cheek and arm. Mother to a frail 4-year-old boy named Tommy who suffered from a lingering cough that doctors whispered might be consumption. Rejected by 9 previous prospects who sought unblemished perfection. And Harlan's heart twisted like a thorn in his boot as he gazed at her image, seeing not flaws but a mirror of his own wounded spirit, and without hesitation, he nodded, sealing the deal with a handshake that felt like fate's own grip. The journey to bring Clara west was fraught with delays, as winter storms howled across the plains like vengeful spirits, turning rivers into raging torrents and delaying the stagecoach by weeks, during which Harlan prepared his ranch house, a modest adobe structure with a leaky roof and a stone fireplace that he scrubbed clean, carving a small bed for Tommy from pine wood he'd felled himself, stocking the pantry with flour, beans, and dried meat, all while his mind raced with doubts. Would she see him as the rugged outcast he truly was, with his sun-baked skin and hands rough as sandpaper, or could they forge something real from the ashes of their shared pain? Finally, on a crisp spring morning when the bluebonnets blanketed the hills in a sea of purple, the stagecoach rumbled into Abilene, dust billowing like smoke from a branding iron, and Harlan stood there in his best shirt, starched, stiff and uncomfortable, his hat in hand, heart pounding like a Mustang's hooves. As the door creaked open and Clara emerged, her bonnet framing a face that bore the scar like a badge of survival, her eyes a soft hazel that held depths of sorrow and resilience. And behind her, little Tommy clung to her skirts, his cheeks pale and eyes wide with wonder at this vast new world, coughing softly into a handkerchief that Clara pressed to his lips with a mother's tender worry. And in that instant, as their gazes met, Harlan felt a crack in the armor he'd built around his soul, a flood of emotion threatening to overwhelm him. For she was no discarded remnant but a woman of quiet strength, her voice soft yet steady as she introduced herself, thanking him for choosing her when no one else would, and he, stumbling over his words like a greenhorn on his first ride, assured her that it was he who was grateful, for in her he saw the partner his lonely heart had craved. The ride back to the ranch was silent at first, the wagon wheels creaking over ruts in the road, Tommy dozing against Clara's side as she gazed at the endless horizon, her scarred hand resting protectively on his head, and Harlan, stealing glances, shared snippets of his life. The loss of his parents, the years wandering from ranch to ranch, the dream of building something lasting, and Clara, her voice breaking like dawn's first light, opened up about her own tragedies, how she'd married young to a mill worker in Chicago who died in a factory accident, leaving her pregnant and alone, how the fire that scarred her had taken her family's home when she was a girl, forcing her into servitude to survive, and how Tommy's birth had been a miracle amidst the grief, but his illness now haunted her every waking moment, doctors saying he needed clean air and rest that the city couldn't provide, and as she spoke, tears glistened on her cheeks, catching the sunlight like diamonds, and Harlan, moved beyond words, reached out a tentative hand to wipe one away, his touch gentle as a summer breeze, whispering that here on the ranch, they'd fight for Tommy together, that no child of theirs, for he already thought of the boy that way, would face the world alone, and in that shared vulnerability, a bond began to form, fragile as a newborn foal but with the potential to grow strong. Settling into ranch life was no easy feat, with Clara learning to milk cows and tend the garden, her scarred arm aching from the unaccustomed labor, while Harlan taught Tommy to ride a gentle pony, the boy's laughter ringing out like bells despite his coughs that racked his small frame, and nights were spent by the fire, Clara mending clothes with nimble fingers, Harlan reading from an old Bible his mother had left him, stories of redemption that mirrored their own, but beneath the budding harmony lurked shadows of doubt, Clara's nightmares of the fire, waking her in sweats, calling out for lost loved ones, and Harlan comforting her in the dark, holding her close as she sobbed, his own memories of abandonment surfacing like ghosts, making him fear he'd fail them as others had failed him. And Tommy's health waxed and waned, days of playfulness followed by feverish spells that left Clara pacing the floor, brewing herbal teas from wild sage, her heart breaking anew each time he struggled for breath, and one stormy night, as thunder cracked like gunfire and rain lashed the windows, Tommy's cough turned to a rattle, his little body burning with fever, and Harlan, panic gripping his chest like a vice, saddled rusty in the downpour, riding through the mud-slicked trails to fetch Doc Harlan from town, the journey a blur of lightning flashes and desperate prayers, arriving back just as dawn broke, the doctor examining the boy with grave eyes, prescribing rest and a tonic, warning that without a miracle, the child might not see another spring, and in the aftermath, as Tommy slept fitfully, Clara collapsed into Harlan's arms, her body shaking with sobs, whispering that she couldn't lose him, that he'd been her light in the darkness, and Harlan, tears streaming down his weathered face, vowed to move heaven and earth, selling off cattle to afford better medicine shipped from the east, working double shifts to keep the ranch afloat, all while his love for Clara deepened, a fierce, protective flame that burned away his solitude. As seasons turned, with summer's heat giving way to fall's golden hues, their relationship blossomed amidst the trials, stolen moments of tenderness. Harlan surprising Clara with a bouquet of wildflowers picked at dawn, her smile lighting up her scarred features like sunrise on the mountains. Tommy's improving health allowing family picnics by the creek, where they'd splash in the cool water, laughter echoing off the rocks. But fate, ever the cruel gunslinger, had more in store, for word came of rustlers plaguing the neighboring ranches, bold thieves stealing livestock under cover of night, and one fateful evening, as Harlan patrolled his fences, shots rang out like cracks in the sky, a bullet grazing his shoulder, sending him tumbling from his horse, and he fought back, his revolver blazing, downing two of the outlaws before the rest fled, but the wound festered, infection setting in like poison in his veins, leaving him bedridden, feverish dreams haunting him of losing Clara and Tommy. And it was Clara who nursed him, her scarred hands cooling his brow with damp cloths, feeding him broth, her voice a soothing lullaby as she sang old hymns. Tommy curled at his side, whispering stories of brave cowboys, and in his delirium, Harlan confessed his deepest fears, that he wasn't worthy of them, that his rough life would drag them down. But Clara, eyes fierce with love, silenced him with a kiss, her lips soft against his, declaring that he was the one who'd chosen her when no one else would, that his heart was the purest she'd known. And as he healed, their intimacy grew, shared whispers in the night turning to passionate embraces, a union born of mutual healing. But tragedy struck again when winter's grip tightened, a blizzard howling in from the north, blanketing the land in snow deeper than a man's height, isolating the ranch, and Tommy's cough returned with vengeance, his breath's shallow gasps, Clara's desperation mounting as supplies dwindled, Harlan braving the storm to hunt for game, returning frostbitten but triumphant with a deer. Yet the boy's condition worsened, his skin pale as the drifts outside, and in a heart-wrenching vigil, they held him through the night, Clara rocking him, tears freezing on her cheeks, Harlan praying aloud for the first time in years, begging for mercy, and as the storm broke at dawn, Tommy's eyes fluttered open, a weak smile crossing his lips, whispering, "Pa," to Harlan, the word piercing his soul like an arrow. But the reprieve was short-lived, for the next fever spike came swift, the child's body too frail to fight, and in the quiet hours before sunrise, Tommy slipped away, his small hand going limp in Clara's grasp, the silence deafening, shattered only by her guttural wail that echoed through the cabin like a wounded animal's cry. Harlan holding them both, his own sobs mingling with hers, the pain a tidal wave drowning them in grief, burying the boy under a cottonwood tree as the snow melted, marking the grave with a cross Harlan carved, and scribed, "Beloved son," and in the aftermath, their world shattered, Clara withdrawing into silence, staring at the horizon with hollow eyes, Harlan blaming himself for not doing more, the ranch feeling empty as a ghost town. But slowly, through shared tears and memories, they clung to each other, finding solace in their love, Harlan proposing under the stars one clear night, kneeling in the dirt with a ring fashioned from a horseshoe nail, vowing to honor Tommy's memory by living fully, and Clara, her voice trembling, accepting, their wedding a simple affair in town, vows exchanged with the depth of survivors, promising forever in the face of loss, building a life together, welcoming a daughter years later who carried Tommy's spirit, the ranch thriving as a testament to their resilience, Harlan often reflecting on that day he chose the one no one wanted, realizing she'd been the one his heart needed all along, a story of heartbreak mended by love's unyielding thread. And if this tale of the cowboy who dared to choose the overlooked bride tugged at your heartstrings, leaving you with tears and a renewed faith in second chances, then hit that subscribe button right now for more emotional, heart-wrenching stories from the Old West that will keep you coming back for more. Don't forget to like and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful narrative like this one.